Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product here at Alpha Software. And today I am joined by Chris Martin, who is head of our beta test department and is also one of our senior solutions engineers. Today we're going to be going over a topic that we had started a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and it had to do with APIs and API calls. At the time, I showed a pretty simple API call, and I said I'd like to give you a more advanced example, maybe using a technology called Node.js. And in fact, that is in fact what we are going to do here today. And it's a real-world example, and one I think that you're going to find pretty useful, especially if you've never used Node.js before, or if you have used Node.js but don't know how it all works within Alpha. We are here to demystify that. We're also here to answer any questions you may have, so you can type those questions into the questions box or the chat box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So to begin with, I want to make sure, Chris, can you just let me know that you can see my screen and stuff?
Yeah, I can see screen.
Okay, cool. It says Node.js on it. Yeah, I thought that was just a very silly stock graphic because I couldn't figure what it has to do.
Actually, I'm seeing Alpha Software.
Oh, you're still seeing that. All right. Here we go.
There we go. Nice.
See, that's why I check. Excellent. Thanks very much. All right. So this is my bad stock graphic. The other thing is that we do have a couple of questions, and I think I'd like to, and they both have, actually, I got 3 questions today from 3 people, all asking about DevCon 2023. When is it going to be? How much is it going to cost? And what is going to be in it? And yes, we are late in making an announcement about DevCon. And I think a real DevCon announcement should come out next week, hopefully as early as next week. But I can give you a little bit of heads up. I happen to have some inside information. So it will happen in October. And if you recall, it'll probably span over 2 days or so. It's still going to be a virtual event. Unfortunately, we could not get things together the way we wanted them to be able to do a hybrid or an in-person event. However, the good news is, whereas in the past you were paying between $300 and $500 for a ticket to DevCon, I am happy to announce that we have decided this year DevCon will be free of charge. You will not have to pay anything to attend. So I hope that we get a lot more people participating, especially people who are on the fence saying, oh, that's fine, but I don't know if I've got a couple $100 to spend. So we'll start getting into the content and dates next week. It's probably going to be the 3rd week in October. I'm thinking around a Wednesday and a Thursday, maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we're still breaking that down. Excellent. All right. So now that I've started with good news, let's go into a great presentation. Before last week or 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, we were talking about AJAX callbacks and API calls. And I had a very, very simple example, which I showed you, which basically it was a button on a form. And when you press the button on the form, it made a callback to a server, and it sent back a value, and it wrote that value back into a field, probably the simplest form of AJAX callback there is. So basically with an AJAX callback, you have a web or a mobile application that's running in a browser, and it has in the case of a mobile application, it's a browser within the mobile application. And it uses JavaScript to make an AJAX callback to, whoops, what did I do here? Clicking buttons, I shouldn't be. Oh, here we go. And we'll make a callback to the server to get the data back. Now, this is a very simple form of it. A more typical form might be something like this, where you're doing a web. So this, well, let's go back to this one. This one you would use for something like, maybe you're writing a value back to a database, or you're reading something from a database. This is what the AJAX callback could do. It could help your app pull back data from the cloud that it needs to access. It could also be used for authentication and login. For example, if you're sending it over a username and password, the XBasic script or the cloud service on the other side decides that you're authenticated and moves you back to the web or mobile application. A more advanced version of this is one in which the XBasic script is calling a third-party service. So you could think of this as like maybe a weather service. I know we did an example of that a few years back, where your web or mobile application made a call to XBasic, and XBasic made a call to a weather service. I think it was AccuWeather, and it got back the forecast and the temperature and current details and even some pictures and icons of the weather that can be displayed back in the web or mobile application. Another use for this is for payment processing. If you've used Stripe or in the past Authorized Net, you could make a call from your web or mobile application to XBasic back here on your server, and that server could then go and process that transaction with a third-party transaction servicing process. And for a while, we supported both Authorized Net and Stripe for that. However, our Authorized Net implementation has fallen behind, and it may be deprecated. We may decide just to go with one particular service. So this shouldn't be a huge problem because you can always write your own XBasic script to talk to that third-party service, and that's what a lot of people did. In fact, Alpha had a built-in XBasic function which had all the XBasic that was necessary to talk to Authorized Net. However, as it turns out, things have changed. We haven't updated that function, and one of the problems with XBasic functions is that you, the user, you, the developer, don't have the ability to get in there and tinker with them. Instead, what you'll need to do is sort of write a replacement for that. So this happened to someone that we had come to us, and Chris helped them out by making a script that will allow them to talk to that third-party service. When he was in this third-party service is, we said, Authorized Net, but we realized instead of starting this whole XBasic script from scratch, a good head start would be, what if Authorized Net had already written something for us that we could use so that we didn't have to handle, sending the correct headers, sending the correct stuff, parsing the JSON and all of that, something that handled everything for us in one place. And in fact, they do. So if you go over to the Authorized Net site where they do the payment processing, this is the page that shows you, for example, in their documentation, how to charge a credit card. And if you look, they give you some various types of sample code. Unfortunately, XBasic isn't one of the kinds that they have. They support these 5 very common types of languages: PHP, CS, Java, Ruby, Python, and Node. Now, we've talked about Python in the past. We've done some examples of running Python code, but we haven't done an awful lot with Node. And when we went to take a look at the documentation that exists, we realized that there wasn't a ton of it there. And so even though Node is actually really easy to use inside Alpha Anywhere, it's been a mystery to quite a lot of people, and we're hoping to demystify that today. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to use Node with that callback with your application. So this changes the model just a little bit. If you remember, I'm going to go back 2 slides, bang, bang, 3 slides. It used to be XBasic script to the third-party web service. And now it's XBasic script, or what I call a stub, that goes to a Node.js script. And it's the Node.js script that's going to talk to our third-party service, get the information back, pass it to our XBasic script, who will then return the information that is needed back to the web or mobile application. Now, I call this a stub because it's just a very small script. Basically, all we're doing in our XBasic is saying, hey, XBasic, there is a script, a Node.js script that I'd like you to run, and here are the parameters that I'd like, and please give me back the results. And that's the entire script. That's the stub. And so that's basically how all of that works. I'm not going to get into the weeds of it because that's what I've got Chris for. And so Chris, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent. So Chris is going to show us how you actually put this Node.js thing into your application and get it to work with a third-party service. I would like to access my camera. I don't know why it wants to do that. No. So I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter. And hold on a second. Go to sharing. And right about now, you should see a dialog box on your screen.
Okay.
And there it is. I'm taking a look at your Alpha Anywhere is now showing.
Okay, so you've already showed this uh, in your slideshow, but I can quickly show here. So basically, this is the authorized net, and in order to get to the code, get to the API to know what I needed to do, I've had to follow a few screens here. Developer, visit the developer center. That basically brought me to this screen right here, and here's the API reference. So this is the first screen that I wanted. And when I hit the visit, then I'm going to see what Dave just showed you right here, which is all the options in the node code. Now, I'm not a big XBasic expert. I have not used XBasic that much. I actually knew nothing about Node.js before starting this. So I was kind of starting with nothing. So basically, I did some research and I said, okay, what do I need to do to run Node, run some Node sample code on my machine?
We definitely gave you the worst job here, Chris. You really are a mobile guy. You know how to build things backwards and forwards. We're like, great, can you use Node and XBasic? Well, but I'm glad that it turned out easy for you.
But basically getting to service stuff. So I said, okay, so here's an API. How do I use it? So basically, I installed Node on my machine in the command line prompt. I installed Node. Then I came here and I found their API, an installer for the API, an npm installer to run it locally on my machine. So I installed that, and after having some complaints about versions and things like that, I got it to run. Then I found out that there was basically included in here. I'm not sure exactly where it is in here, but there's a link to some sample code for using the API. So I downloaded the sample code and basically did a command line prompt npm, and I told it to run this sample code. And sure enough, once I had versions correct and all the software installed that they needed, I was able to run it. Then my problem was, okay, so now how do I take this and bring this into Alpha Anywhere? That was the next trick. And that's where I had to reach out and get a little help from some of the developers at Alpha Software. So I showed the developers what I did so far. I got this working. Now how do I bring this into Alpha Anywhere and get this to work? And so I'm gonna create a new project here. Yeah, I'm gonna call it create empty workspace. Say okay. I'm gonna call this. Hopefully I didn't create one API demo. Called API demo. I'm gonna say okay. Okay, let me zoom in here and minimize that. Normally I have 8 screens in front of me, but I only have 1 now, so I can't hide all this stuff. So here's my base project. Now I'm gonna create a new web component here. UX component. Say okay. So now I can start adding controls here for my credit card processing that I want to do. So I have a basic idea of what I want to create and what I'm going to need. So I'm going to copy that code from here. So I'm going to go get this example that I already created, but I'm going to pull everything in here just so you can see everything working here. I'm going to copy all these controls, copy selected controls to clipboard, minimize that, and then here I'm going to paste controls to clipboard after selected, which nothing's selected. So here are all my controls here. They don't actually do anything yet. I can do a working preview. Wait for it to be rendered. So here are all my controls, but they don't actually do anything yet. So I've got a card number, an expiration, everything I know that I want to do here. And some default values in here, so I don't have to go in and type all this stuff. So here's my application, but now I want to connect it to the credit card processor called AuthorizeNet. And that's where I was like, and let me save this first before I go any further. Test. save, is how do I now call that code and get that into get that API into alpha? How do I make the call? And that's where I had to learn a little bit of XBasic and learn how to do it. So the way you do it right here is under Web Projects Control Panel, is you have a selection here called Node. And we're going to bring in a node, we're going to connect to a node module. And to do that, you under More, you see where you have some stuff for here for Node. And one of the things you have is using an NPM, and that's how I installed it initially, to do a test running using the command line prompt without having anything to do with alpha anywhere whatsoever. So this is what I was shown, how to start the project and get it going. So I'm going to install a node module here. And the name of the module is Authorize Net. And that's the actual name of this out in NPM. This is where it's going to go out and do an NPM install. And this is the name. And this is case sensitive. When I first tried this, I did a capital A here and it failed. So I'm going to say install the latest version of this. There are other things that you can do here, but I'm going to just specifically for what I need for this project, because there's a lot involved, I'm going to install the latest version. And so this is going out right now and getting everything it needs. It's going to take a little bit, especially since I'm streaming here. It may take a little longer than normal.
It looks like a little command window opened at the bottom. Maybe there's stuff scrolling by. Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
You can watch it do it.
This stuff is all being installed locally here. Okay, it's done.
Wow, that was quick. Look at all that stuff it installed.
All the stuff
Holy
that
cannoli. Wow.
Don't ask me what any of this is. I don't know. I just know it's stuff that
it's node stuff.
A lot of stuff that needs to be done to do everything, to use everything that's in authorized net. And there's a lot of stuff that's in there. I had to simplify the samples that I found. The samples did so much stuff that I didn't need. So I had to take their example, get that to work, and then just go through it and figure out what I needed and what I didn't need to basically get the information I needed to pass it a credit card number and get that data and return it back here into all these fields here, everything that happened. So now that I got that installed, let's go back to here to Node. And I'm going to create a, excuse me, sorry, we already did that. I'm going to create a new Node API. There's some other things that you can do here, which I'm not going to be getting into now, but I'm going to create a new Node API. So I'm going to click New Node. And this is the stub that Dave was talking about earlier that gets created for you. You get a stub, and then you get an implementation. And this is all done for you by Alpha Anywhere automatically when you go through those button sequences to get to this point. So I'm going to come back to my and not type everything that I had to put in here. This is, like I said, just a general overview on how everything is done. Is that the correct one? Let's see, go to here. Authorize now, you can see I already created it here. So here's the definition stub. I'm going to copy that over so I don't have to type all of this in. Copy. And replace this right here. Say paste. Okay, so now when I go to the implementation, you can see here I've added some things. I have a card number. I know I want to pass a card number, an expiration date, the CVV number. That's the number that's on the back of your credit card. You're authorizing, and then there's an amount. Now, an original example didn't have the amount, but I figured out how to add this in later. The example that was up there for authorized net. And as you can see here, my implementation changed a little. So it shows, it shows here that everything that I need to fill in, everything I'm passing this information in, but now I want to do something with this information. And if we go look at the original call that I was getting back from the sample application that I used, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And we really didn't need all of the stuff that was in here. So I put a lot of this out to simplify this, just to go authorize a credit card. And let me go get the code here back from our sample here. I'm gonna go back to hopefully the right one. Nope, that's the wrong one. This one. Now I'm gonna get my implementation here. So here's my implementation. I'm gonna copy it over first before I go over it. Copy all this. Go back to hopefully the right one, correct? So here's my implementation. So I'm gonna replace all of this. Basically, this is the only thing that's gonna remain that's original here, is the actual call to call this. So I'm gonna select all this code and paste this in. So here's the implementation. So this is all Node.js code in here. So there are some variables that are created here, API contracts and API controllers. That's all the stuff that we downloaded. But then there's also some utilities and constants. That's something we want to pull in, which I don't have in here right now, the utilities and the constants. So I'm gonna come here from my previous project. Here's the utils and the constants. I'm gonna copy that. This is Windows 11, that's why it's looking a little weird if anybody's still running 10. So I'm gonna come back to my project here. Am I in the right one? I think I'm not.
I think the old one's on the left and the new one's on the right.
The old one's on the left, so this is the new one. Okay, so I'm gonna save. Oh no, it's not, because
I'm sorry, the new one's on the left. Is what I meant to say.
because the save wasn't
Just the
enabled.
opposite.
So I'm gonna save all this so I can paste those components and then come back to this. So I'm gonna click save, and then I'm gonna open up my folder just so I have this in here. I'm gonna do a paste, and then I'm gonna open up. So the utilities has some utilities. I'm not sure exactly what they do, but I included it because it wanted it. I'm sure it's using it somewhere in there. All the rest of the stuff that has to do with this API is under this folder here called Node. That's all of this that you see right here. Now, under the constants, I'm playing around right now with authorized net in their sandbox. So it's a test area. So I can test without actually authorizing credit cards or having to have a real credit card number. And that's what this constants folder is for here. So let me open that with a notepad. Open with notepad. Open. So please don't use these numbers. This is my API.
Oh yeah, Chris gets an email each time, so don't do that.
Yeah, I get an email each time somebody. You can create your own in there that has these values. But this is my sandbox account that I have here, and these are actual numbers that I use. And I didn't realize when I first did this. I saw I all of a sudden went back to my email and checked my personal email. I had a ton of things saying credit card not authorized or credit card authorized, and it's like, what is going on? I thought somebody hacked my machine. These are all the emails that I got back, and that's based off of creating my sandbox account. I didn't include any of that in my code, so that's what this came from. So I just wanted to make sure that that file is in there. And by the way, this is just a general overview. I'm not going to get into that much detail about the code. I will do that in documentation later, but right now I want to show you a brand new project. And overall what I had to do, but it was very painstaking to get to this point. And it's going to be that way if I use somebody else's API, because I know nothing about the API or what I really need to do. So you need to learn about the API first, before you can even get this far. So I pasted that in there. That's in there. Let's go back to the authorized net that we just created. And you can see the code here. So some values that I'm passing in here are the credit card number, the expiration date, and all this right here. And that's going to be passed in through the XBasic call. And here's our stub to call that through XBasic. So that gets passed in here and then used here. So this is all of their code that's in the demo. I just basically replaced like this hard-coded credit card and things that they had here with information that I'm going to be passing in through XBasic. So if we come down here, you'll see after everything is filled in that has to do with the credit card information, basically it's making a create a transaction response. So we're going to get a response. We're going to do the call. We're going to pass everything in that it needs, and then we're going to return that to our XBasic code right here. Like I said, I'll explain all of this. There's a lot to understanding all this. I just want to give a basic overview showing you that it is possible,
Right.
but the code will
This
be out.
This technique you can use with every API that has got
API.
Node.
And
Yeah,
this is going to be
not just
specific for
authorized
each
net. Yeah.
API, so that's why I don't want to get too much into the weeds about exactly what was done here to make this work. But I believe we're going to put this up on GitHub, Dave, later on, so you can get my exact demo here. I was able to give this to a client, my project, and then it just worked for them. So they were able to take it from there and I start using authorized net just by replacing their API login key. That's where those come into play right here. And that's where it's pulling it from the constants file, the login key. So this is the code right here for that. I'm gonna cancel and get out of here. And let's go back to our test application. The next thing I needed to do was, okay, now I need to run the card and I need to pass all this information in, and then I need to return all the information and fill in all these boxes and fill in this little database, which is just using static data right now. So it's going to be empty each time I open it. So I needed to create some XBasic, and that's where this comes into play right here. So am I getting the right one this time? Yep, it should be. I'm going to cancel out of here. I'm going to go to my other project and get all this XBasic here. So here's the function that was created. I'm going to copy this.
And it's not super long. It looks like
No,
it's 15 lines.
and it's mostly building
Mostly string formatting. Yeah.
mostly string formatting in this. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that in here. So here's everything that's going on. So this is the main piece right here. This is where authorized net. It's calling this authorized net right here. It's calling this, and it's going to expect all these values to be passed in when it calls. So let's come back to here. So I'm calling authorized net. Right here, I'm getting the data that's being passed in from the UI. So here's the E data submitted. I know there's going to be a credit card number that's filled in, expiration, the CVV code, and the amount. I'm going to then, from this variable that I created here of the authorized net, I'm going to pass in all this information. So there's that function that we created in there. I'm going to pass all these values. Next, I'm going to parse the data out, do a JSON parse of the data, and I'm going to take all the values and I'm going to create this big huge string, which does basically action JavaScript here, dialog object, which I'm sure many of you used before. But it's going to put this all into one big string. The one thing that I ran into when I started doing this was that there was technically two different messages that you're going to get back, and they don't always include the same value. So you'll get an error if we don't put the statement in here. And basically, if I have a successful credit card transaction, I'm going to get a messages right here, and I'm going to get a description. So I want to get that value and pass that back to the UI that it was successful, along with all this other information that gets passed. But if it's a failure, then it doesn't show this, and it does an error. So that's why I had to have this little error handler here saying that, well, if it didn't pass, I don't have a description. So jump down to here and show what the issues are. So here's the code that I just passed in. Let's see if we covered everything. We have this created. We copied the files that we wanted to copy in. We have our constants, utilities. So this is a brand new project, never run before. Let's save everything that I've done. Let's go to working preview. And let's see if this runs. So these are hard-coded values that I pass in. We have an expiration date that obviously is false on the credit card. I'm hiding the CVV code. It's just 999 that we use. But if you're doing a UI, you might want to not show that value that's when somebody's typing it in. So I'm going to run the card and cross my fingers that this actually works, and it did. So we have a success of not as successful because the credit card was wrong. So I'm going to put an actual real value. I'm going to put 26 instead. I'm going to run it. And we have, whoa, there we go. There we go.
Yep.
This time it's approved. I was looking at the old one. This time the credit card was approved, but what if we had the wrong value here for the credit card, an invalid credit card? I'm going to run it again. And I have a little bit of a delay here that I purposely put in to refresh this. So their card is invalid. So I basically took a Node API that was out there, brought it into alpha. And like I said, this is going to be different. So a lot of the detail in this may not, you may not need, because you're going to be using a different API, you're going to get different data. But I'm hoping everything that I just showed here, and you can go back and review the video later on, and you can go view the sample code and play around with this, step through the XBasic, and basically see how it's done. You would have to go to authorizing that, like I said, and create an account. Please don't use my numbers. Because I'll get a bunch of emails and be panicked.
It's a free account. Fill out the form. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a free account. You create a sandbox account, and part of that will return you those two numbers that you basically come in here and you put those in the constants. You replace those values in that. As you can see, all this just worked. Granted, I pasted the values in. There was a lot to put this whole thing together. There's going to be a lot to put whatever you're trying to create together also. But this is basically how you do it without, like I said, without getting into too much detail. But when you look at the code, you get a better understanding of what I had to do here.
That's great. And yes, we will take this project and put it up on GitHub for people who would like to see the implementation of AuthorizeNet working with Alpha anyway.
And believe me, I'm horrible in XBasic. So there was a huge learning curve for me, and I never touched Node. The main help that I needed from Alpha, and we're going to be a little clearer on the documentation, was how do I get started? How do I bring that in? And that was all through this little, if you never went and looked at it, it was all basically
That's
right.
The point of our low code platform is you don't have to write as much code. You can use code that's already built and modules that are already assembled. So cool. Yeah. Hey, do we have any questions here? I don't see a lot in the audience today. If not, that's no problem. Of course, you can always send information over to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Chris, thank you very much for presenting today. Thanks for everyone for showing up. We look forward to seeing you next week at our next Alpha Software demo and Q&A webcast. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.